Good morning. I'm just going to pray before I begin the talk. So, Lord God, we thank you so much for your love for us. And we thank you for your word. We thank you that you've given it to us and that you have placed it within us. And as I speak and as we hear your word, may you speak to us afresh today. Amen. A few years back, I used to be a member of an organisation called the Independent Monitoring Board, or IMB, at Winson Green Prison. And the IMB was a government organisation, and there's one for every prison in the country. The role involved going into the prison and making sure that the standards were up to scratch by talking to the governors, the staff and the prisoners. And one department that I visited on several occasions was the chaplaincy department. Whenever I went there, I was always amazed at how many of the prisoners actually engaged with the work that was being done. The proportion of prisoners that the chaplains had contact with was much greater than the proportion of people that ministers in churches have contact with in the communities around our churches. Now, obviously some of the prisoners were abusing the system, however many were genuinely engaging. It was perhaps easy to put this down to the hopelessness, perhaps, of their situation that many of them felt. However, the past couple of weeks has given a greater insight into what might be going on in our prisons when it comes to faith and belief. As I have been forced to spend more time at home with much more restricted contact with the outside world, I have been forced to slow down my lifestyle. If I have nothing to do, I cannot pop into town or go for a coffee. I can't catch up with friends as easily at the weekends. Evenings in particular are a lot less busy than previously, and I have a lot more time to just stop and think. I have been forced to simply slow down. As much as I wish that all of this was not going on, and as much as I pray that it will be brought to an end, there is a part of me that is being liberated from my old way of life and into which God is speaking words of love and peace. As I have reflected upon all of this, I began to see something of what must have been going on in the lives of those prisoners who engaged with the chaplaincy in the prison. Within the confines of their very limited way of life, there had been a choice. Carry on allowing the systems of busyness and expectation to overwhelm you and push you into a corrupt lifestyle with no beneficial outcome to that. Or simply slow down and pay attention to the inner voice that speaks of love and peace in the circumstances in which we find ourselves. When Jesus told the parable of the tenants, he was speaking to an audience who were oppressing the people of Israel. The religious leaders controlled the people's lives. They told them when to wake up or when to go to sleep. They told them when to work or when not to work. And when they were not working, the people were told when to worship and how to worship. All aspects of life were subject to the oversight of the religious authorities and the Roman overseers. For them, it was about power and control rather than love and peace. Jesus therefore spoke this very cleverly constructed parable against them. He told the story about how a man planted a vineyard and put a wall around it as God had established the nation of Israel and given them the law. The man rented the vineyard out in much the same way as God had given oversight of Israel to the religious leaders, with the command that they produce fruit in being a witness to other nations of God's love and mercy. And when the man sent for some of the produce, his servants found tenants who guarded the fruit jealously as their own, rather than as belonging to the vineyard owner. In the same way, God sent prophets to Israel to try and bring the people back, but they were beaten and killed instead. And last of all, the vineyard owner sent his son, and the tenants seized him and killed him as well. As Jesus predicted that the Pharisees and the religious leaders of the day would arrange for his execution outside the city walls, he warned them that they would face God's judgment for how they had oppressed and mistreated God's people and treated them as their own belongings rather than allowing them to be set free into God's love and peace. Jesus challenged the prevailing culture of the day that allowed the rich and the powerful to oppress the poor and the marginalised. He challenged the norms that expected people to toe the line and do what was expected of them. There are many comparisons between that culture and our own culture today. The rich and the powerful still largely control how the rest of the people live and work, even if this is often done under the banner of democracy and mutually beneficial living. We are often treated like economic pawns, being told to work harder and faster, make more money with less resources and time, with the benefit of our labour going up the chain to those who already have more than enough. The environment is exploited for our financial gain, again with the profits going to the rich and powerful countries, and the poor is suffering from rising sea levels and inadequate food stocks. And into the culture of Jesus' day and the culture of our day, these words in Mark 11 verse 10 set out a ground shift in the power structures of the world. The stone the builders have rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvellous in our eyes. Jesus, the stone that was cast aside and who was crucified upon a cross, has become the foundation, not just of our church, not just of our world, but of all creation. As we are forced to slow our lives down, it is worth reflecting on how so much has been stripped away from our everyday lives and to understand what is left at the end of it all. Quite a few years ago now, a song came out of Soul Survivor called When the Music Fades. And I'm going to read an account of the background to that, of how that song came to be written. In the late 1990s, Matt Redman's home church in Watford was going through a spiritually tough time. The worship band's musical creativity was on a high, making new and influential songs for the local church, with an impact on church worship nationwide, even worldwide. Yet, recalled Redman, talking to Crosswalk's David Schrader, there was a dynamic missing. So the pastor did a pretty brave thing. The pastor was Mike Pedavaci, the co-founder of the 30,000 attendance annual Soul Survivor and its 20s to 30s sub-brand Momentum. Pedavaci asked his congregation what they were bringing to God in worship, or if they were just there as consumers soaking up the music. His point was that the band and the church had lost their way in worship. The only solution was to strip out every diversion and distraction, and that included the entire sound system and the worship band. Then the music faded. Initially, Matt Redman remembers, unplugging just led to an embarrassing silence. But eventually the congregation rediscovered their own voices, singing unaccompanied, offering up heartfelt prayers and encountering God in a fresh way. By the time they felt sufficiently ready to reintroduce the musicians and sound system, the church had found a new perspective on worship, that it's all about Jesus, and that it demands a response from the heart. Matt Redman's song, The Heart of Worship, simply describes what occurred. When the music fades, all is stripped away, and I simply come, longing just to bring something that's of worth that will bless your heart. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you, Jesus. Our culture has lost its way. For many years, our society has emphasised making money over living in community. Many people have become little more than economic pawns. The elderly and vulnerable have been sidelined with cuts in health spending and social care and growing pressures on wider families. However, over the past weeks, there has been a remarkable shift in culture. Yes, there are still people out there who are behaving appallingly. However, as a country and a world, we have put our economies and educating our future on hold to protect elderly people who often contribute little to the economy anymore. Health spending has rocketed. We hear stories of pollution and emissions levels going into reverse. In our churches, it is not just music that is fading. Our buildings have been shown up for what they really are: bricks and mortar with doors to stop people coming in. Our worship services likewise have been stripped away, and we've had to radically change what we do and how we do it. Even pastoral work to the community has had to be seriously curtailed. And as all this is stripped away, and we feel a sense of deep loss and grief, we are forced to slow down and contemplate what is left of our culture, our society, and our church. And what do we find? The stone the builders have rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvellous in our eyes. There's a new perspective on life, and it is my hope and prayer that when all this is over, our present culture of economic greed, environmental plunder, and marginalising the weakest members of society will undergo a permanent sea change. There is a sense of hope and expectation that out of these dark days, the Lord will do something that is marvellous in our eyes. So as the weeks of isolation roll on, we are offered the chance to view the world from a prisoner's perspective. We are offered the chance to slow ourselves down and find a renewed sense of God's presence in our lives. As all is stripped away around us, as the walls crumble and the music fades, we can simply come back to the heart of worship and say, "It is all about you, Jesus." Amen.